Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging OER During COVID-19, helping students, faculty, and institutions navigate the potential challenges and burdens imposed by traditional learning resources in a global pandemic. My name is Lindsay Gum. I am the New England Board of Higher Education's Open Education Fellow, but I also am an assistant professor and the scholarly communications librarian at Roger Williams University in Bristol, Rhode Island. I co-chair the Rhode Island State Steering Committee for Governor Raimondo's Open Textbook Initiative, and I research the intersections of open education and information literacy in higher education. I am delighted today to be joined by my two colleagues and members of NEBI's Open Education Regional Advisory Committee, Robin DeRosa and Kurt Newton. Say hi. Robin DeRosa is the Director of Learning and Teaching Collaborative at Plymouth State University, where she was originally an English professor and later chair of the Interdisciplinary Studies program. Robin is a national advocate for public higher education, and she works with colleges and universities on designing institutional initiatives and structures centered on learners and their needs. Kurt Newton joined the recently launched MIT OpenCourseware in 2004 after a two-decade career in optical network and internet router product development. As director of the program, he leads the team working with MIT faculty to keep OpenCourseware growing and evolving, and he sets the stage for strategic direction for the next 20 years. Before we start, I just wanted to give a really special thanks to the other members of our advisory committee. They really helped shape the urgency and content of this webinar today, especially Robin and Kurt for graciously agreeing to participate and lend their perspectives. And last but not least, a special thanks to Rachel Stakoviak, NEBI's Associate Director of the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement Program, who has done a lot of the logistical and technical work of making this event happen. So thanks, Rachel. Okay, so we will get started. Just a few housekeeping items before we really dive in. You may see the chat function, but it has been disabled due to the number of participants we have. But we have enabled the question and answer box for questions, so please do submit questions and we will get to them towards the end. There will be the option to upvote questions, so if you see something you'd really like answered, please engage with that. Today's webinar is being recorded and it will be emailed to all registrants. This presentation and any other resources that I referenced today will be available at nebi.org/openeducation. And this presentation and the associated resources are licensed CC BY. And if you are on Twitter, please feel free to tag @NEBI when you're tweeting today. I know a lot of you may not be familiar with our organization or regional compacts in general, so I just wanted to give a brief background before we get started. The New England Board of Higher Education is located in Boston, Massachusetts. It was founded in 1955 by 6 visionary New England governors who sought to increase access to educational opportunities as a means to support the economic viability of our region. And as we know, that mission remains critical to our region today. Our organization regularly convenes top leaders and decision makers from P12 and higher education, industry, government, and the nonprofit sector. And this creates the critical cross-sector conversations that lead to change, collaboration, alignment, and innovation. Our programs, including the Regional Student Program Tuition Break and New England Independent College Transfer Guarantee, in addition to our upskilling and credentialing initiatives, increase post-secondary education opportunities in our portfolio of collaborative multi-state projects. You can visit our website, nebi.org, to view our research team's legislative and policy analyses, including COVID-19 briefs. You can also sign up to receive the New England Journal of Higher Education's complimentary weekly electronic news blast for regular updates. And we are really thrilled to have participation in today's webinar, both in and outside of New England. I know a lot of you are from outside of New England. So I'll mention that NEBI is one of 4 congressionally recognized regional higher education compacts in the US. Where each are independent of one another, we are all closely aligned in our mission and seek to share best practices and promote innovative approaches to education and policy making. Many of you might be familiar with our current national collaboration, which is the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, referred to as SARA, and it's facilitated in conjunction with the National Council of SARA. We've been fortunate to continue our collaborative work with the other 3 regional compacts, the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, the Southern Regional Education Board, and the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. And over the course of the last 10 months, we've been doing an expansion of research, study, and outreach to existing open education partners and practitioners spanning our country, which brings us to our topic today, leveraging OER during COVID-19. And I really think that this conversation is especially timely as schools start to release their plans for the fall. It's our hope that this webinar will help senior leaders and practitioners articulate just why OER is so critical, especially now as we navigate the many moving pieces, logistics, and considerations that come with creating safe and equitable learning environments for our students during a global pandemic. So I know many of you may be familiar with OER, but many may not. So I just wanted to start us all off on the same page of what am I talking about when I say OER. So OER stands for Open Educational Resources, and I'm going to use the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation's definition. It's widely used, and I think it does a really good job of describing the scope. So OER are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in the public domain or have been released under an open license that permits no-cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution by others with no or limited restrictions. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the licensing structures, but what's important to take away from this definition is that OER equals free, so free access for the student, and it comes with a set of special legal permissions that otherwise copyright does not allow. And OER can be any openly licensed teaching and learning resources, not exclusively textbooks, but you will hear me referring a lot to textbooks during today's presentation. And that's because it's often the learning resource that most of us can universally visualize and have used at some point or another during our careers as students. So I really like this graphic because it helps distinguish between the difference of a free resource for a student and one that is open, or an OER. So an example of a free resource, obviously there's no cost to the student, but it could be a faculty member collating some, library journal articles that they've accessed through the library, ebooks that the library has licensed, or even things like YouTube videos or news articles. They're free to the student. They don't have to pay to access, but they still have copyright permissions that do not allow the user to do certain things like redistribute, revise, or in many cases to retain. So OER, on the other hand, the other side of the lever, an open resource is free, but it comes with these 5R permissions that really allow flexibility when we're talking about pedagogy in the classroom, but also about student access. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that more in a minute. And there's this other component that we're now kind of grappling with in this space called inclusive access. And so that's often licensed through the bookstore, and it's publishers giving first day access to students. So it's oftentimes built into their tuition, or there's some kind of flat rate, but it's still, the copyright permissions are still really restrictive. So that's another piece I'll talk about in a little bit. and those students don't get perpetual access. So I wanted to give just a real live example. So this comes from my institution, actually, from a course that just ran during the first session of summer. So you can see that this is a business textbook. It's a financial managerial accounting, but it also comes with this access package, which oftentimes is, ancillary materials like homework and assessment. So it's a nice, neat little package for faculty. Comes with the textbook, but it also comes with these really convenient assessments that students can use. You can see the problem is the cost, right? So even to buy the used version of this textbook is very expensive. It's $142. And what most students and what most faculty don't understand is that access codes, which is a part of this example, so it's the textbook plus the access code to that homework, access codes expire. So if you actually buy that used copy, you're not getting the access code. And so that means that those students who are buying the used copy don't get a big part of that package, so the homework that is likely required. And the US PIRG just put out a report about 2 weeks ago, and they mentioned that about 1 in 5 students skip buying access codes necessary to complete course assignments, and 17% of students reported skipping buying an access code. So as a result, any student that chooses to skip buying the access code or inadvertently, buys the used copy, they are putting themselves on track to fail the class potentially. And with the rise of access codes, many students are being priced out of participating in class, especially since the homework can be up to 20% of students' grades. So if you can't afford the access code to complete your homework, you're starting out with potentially an 80, right, in the course, if you're not going to be able to participate in the homework. And so for those senior leaders on the call who may not be as familiar with the implications of the textbook crisis, consider a student having to pay the cost of this textbook during a normal fall semester times 5 classes. And then look up the minimum wage in your state and figure out how many hours a student would have to work to pay for those books. And when we consider the current economic recession and the lack of jobs for students or families who normally would be supporting them for these costs, who may also be out of the pandemic, the results is really striking. So when we're talking about, and I love this arrow because this is required. So the student doesn't make this purchase, the faculty member has indicated that this resource is required for the course, and that usually implies that it's going to be referenced heavily for exams, quizzes, any kind of assessments. So the alternate is an open textbook. So an open textbook is free, plus it comes with that set of special 5 permissions usually. So these are from Rice University's OpenStax collection, and they do a lot of the general education and intro survey level courses. So a faculty member could choose this textbook, which is free to the student, and it also comes with that set of special permissions, right? So if the faculty member doesn't necessarily, if volume 1 doesn't align perfectly with their course learning outcomes, they have the legal permissions to change and revise that content to better reflect the learning outcomes. And so that kind of just moves us on to what happens when a student can't afford a textbook, right? And so the College Board recommends that students budget nearly $1,300 for textbooks annually. And when we're thinking about enrollments and retention, senior leaders really need to start paying attention to these alarming statistics. So the Florida Virtual Campus puts out a survey every few years, and they just recently redid the survey about the impact of textbook costs and what that means for students. right? And so we can see that 64% of students reported not purchasing a required textbook, emphasis on required, and that 47% say they take fewer courses, 40% are not registering for a specific course, 35% are earning a poor grade because they couldn't afford the textbook, and then 22% are dropping a course. So really, again, when we're thinking about enrollments and retention, this cost barrier really is affecting the institution more than many people realize it is. And I wanted to kind of draw back to that US PIRG study I mentioned a few minutes ago. Almost all of the respondents, the student respondents of that study, worried that foregoing these materials would impact their grade, right? So when they were asked if they were concerned that not purchasing the textbook or access code would negatively impact their grade, 90% of those students said, yes, I'm worried. And this worry indicates that students know and they understand the risk of not purchasing the access code or to course materials, yet they consistently opt not to purchase them, right? So this is an equity issue, and it's just another added layer of privilege, and students who can afford their books and supplies are more likely to academically perform better than those students who cannot afford. But with OER, all students get day one access, free access to their materials. So let's see. So the next few slides, I've really kind of thought about why does OER, so I just kind of gave you the background of like, OER is important, right? We know students can't afford their textbooks. All these studies have been done, but why does it matter more than ever right now, right? And in my mind, the health and safety of our students is front and center as we enter the fall semester, right? Institutions are forming committees, they're sorting out all of these different multi-layer logistics of how are we going to keep our students, faculty, staff safe. And I think one of the things that probably gets overlooked is these learning resources, right? And so because of the cost and students who can't afford those textbooks, they often share textbooks amongst themselves, or they borrow books on reserve at the library. And because of COVID-19 and safety measures that will be put into place at institutions, these options are likely going to be unavailable to these students in the fall, right? So physical materials will need to be quarantined for 36 hours per the CDC recommendation. So a student walks into the library and they, didn't purchase the textbook for whatever reason. Maybe they couldn't afford it. And it's on reserve at the library. They check it out for the 3 hours. They do the assignment. They bring it back. The library then has to quarantine those materials for 36 hours. At least I know that's kind of the plan going forward in my library. So that's a huge barrier. Anyone else needing to use those materials for, maybe it's the same student in a few days, they have to wait 36 hours. And then the other piece, the sharing piece, students, will either have to risk their health and safety and the person who they're sharing from, or go without the required text. And if we think back to that Florida virtual study that we just talked about, showing student success without their textbook access, this is going to be a huge issue. So if we're using OER, if we encourage faculty to adopt and use openly licensed resources, whether that is a textbook or something else, this mitigates this problem. Okay, so the next category I was thinking about is, obviously OER has always been in some way about financial savings, but if we think about where we are right now, our country's in a recession, unemployment levels are at a historic high, families are often very caught off guard by the out-of-pocket cost associated with textbooks and access codes. And so students going to the bookstore during the first week of class, they find out, wow, I'm looking at my textbook list and these books are so expensive. And, normally maybe they'd call mom or dad, or they look in their own bank account and say, okay, I have this much money. a lot of families are unemployed right now. A lot of students are unemployed. So that barrier, that access barrier is going to grow. And again, just always circling back, OER ensures free first day access to required learning materials, right? I think this is one of my favorite slides, and considerations about why OER right now, during this global pandemic. OER offers a lot of flexibility in this global pandemic, but I think the licensing structure of OER is really key here. So the licensing structures allow students to retain, that was one of those 5 R's, retain, the materials in perpetuity. So students may need to withdraw from a course for various reasons. They might need to drop out of school altogether for financial, health, caretaking responsibilities. And when we think about those students when they come back, OER allows them to just pick up kind of where they left off because they can retain that resource. Copyrighted resources, if you don't physically buy the book, like a physical copy, obviously you can keep that. But if you are renting, which is usually a cheaper option, so many students do opt to rent their textbooks, and obviously you rent it, you have to give it back. But if you have to retake that course for any reason, you have to either re-rent or repurchase that book. Whereas OER, you'd have access, perpetual access to that resource, that learning resource, forever, essentially. And even if there's a new edition that comes out, students would still have free perpetual access to that new edition. And the other component of this is the pedagogical flexibility that faculty can enjoy with OER in the licensing structures. So I know, at least at my institution this last semester, when everyone was forced online, there was a lot of faculty scrambling, contacting me, can I use this? It's copyrighted, fair use, like lots of confusion. And a lot of them just gave up and said, oh, I'm not going to use that. Like it's too complicated and I don't want to get in trouble. But with openly licensed resources, faculty have far more flexibility in their pedagogy and they don't have to compromise on the resources that they're using. And then there's this student-centered pedagogy piece, which I really love. It's something that I'm really interested in. I'm writing a lot about these days. Online teaching, which we're all doing these days, requires new and innovative ways to engage our students. And open pedagogy, which is a student-centered approach to OER and knowledge creation, really does have endless opportunities to center our students in this knowledge creation, to engage them more. And the licensing structures of OER and openly licensed materials permit our students to revise and remix existing content and to build upon and to customize, so they can collaborate with their faculty to do this. There's lots of opportunities for faculty and students to view their own discipline through the lens of timely and relevant public health and social justice issues like COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter, the murder of George Floyd, by co-creating materials that can then be openly licensed and shared and repurposed beyond their own classroom. So when we're thinking about institutions and the return on investment, it's really significant. So I just wanted to touch on this quickly for those senior leaders who may be on the call. We've put 3 different studies up here that essentially show that OER does really wonderful things for return on investments for institutions. So the first study that I have from 2015 shows that students enrolled in courses who are using OER, they have higher credit loads than those enrolled in non-OER courses. And in one study, 42.2% of students who saved money with OER said that they reinvested those funds at the institution. So either by paying their tuition or by taking more credits, they're putting it back into the institution. And OER decreases drop rates, and that reduction in refunds to students from drop classes represents a substantial new source of revenue for institutions. And that comes from a study done by David Wiley in 2016. So I wanted to give kind of a real example of return on investment. So for me, it was easy just to pull from my own institution. So we have a program at Roger Williams, which we call the OER Faculty Fellows. And essentially, we get a small cohort of faculty to get rid of their expensive commercial textbook and to adopt or revise or create either an open textbook or some kind of resource. We only invest about $7,000 a year for these faculty. And those funds are used from mini grants for the faculty to do this work. And just in the last 5 years or so, these faculty who have participated in the last 5 cohorts, the savings, it's resulted in savings over $300,000 for students, for about 3,000 of our students, which is really incredible. $7,000 a year is not a lot of money. The library partners with our Center for Teaching and Learning budget-wise, so it's a nice split. And it really can have significant savings for the students. And I just wanted to show this example from a student who was enrolled in one of our Faculty Fellows courses. So Sam is going to be a senior this year at Roger Williams University. He's actually the Student Senate president. We're really proud of him. Sam is a first-generation college student, and he took Introduction to Sociology with Dr. Teal Rothschild, and she was one of our OER Faculty Fellows. And she took the OpenStax Intro to Soc book. She looked at it and said, you know, I like this, but I need to revise it a little bit to fit my course learning outcomes. And she tailored it, and this quote really shows that her students appreciated the customization of that textbook. And remember that the only way she was able to do that was because these resources come with those special legal permissions that allow for revision and remixing and customization to the learning outcomes that faculty members need. So as you can see, students like Sam really do appreciate it when their learning materials are customized for their courses. This quote was really long and it's not included here, but Sam goes on to comment that he was really grateful that his professor used an open textbook because he had joined her class late. So I think he joined 2 weeks late, and he said that he had already purchased a textbook for the course that he dropped, and he was absolutely dreading having to come up with the money to buy the textbook for this newly added course. And when he showed up and realized that she was using a free textbook, he was just super grateful and relieved. Moving on, so again, talking about student success, but this study done at the University of Georgia in 2018 shows exactly how OER can help students who have been historically underserved. So on the left, you can see that courses who are using OER, the grade point average goes up for all students, but it significantly goes up for non-white students. And on the opposite side, we can see that the drop-fail withdrawal rate reduces for all students, but again, significantly for non-white students. And the slide shows our Pell recipient students the same student success metrics. So OER not only saves students money, but in doing so, it does promote student success for all students, again, but you know, significantly for those historically underserved groups. And I really love the study that showed that, so the cost savings to students associated with the adoption of open textbooks, it doesn't come at the expense of the quality of the resource or student performance. And I think that's one of the misnomers. I hear faculty who are just starting to listen to me about using OER. They're very skeptical and questionable about the quality of the resources. They, hear that it's free and they immediately say, well, if it's free, the quality can't be high, can't be good. But we have to remember that while these resources are free to students, they are not free to create. So the study shows that the quality really is the same as commercial textbooks or better than. So with that, I am going to hand it over to my wonderful colleague, Robin DeRosa, who is going to lend her perspectives. So Robin,
thanks,
over
Lindsay.
to you. You're welcome.
Yeah, so I've been answering a couple questions in the chat, and one of them was actually really kind of about this slide, which is, how do you get faculty on board, particularly for fall? The first thing I'm going to say is when you're thinking about the pitch that you want to make to stakeholders about why you might switch to OER, you want to think about which stakeholder it is that you're talking to, because the amazing thing about OER, unlike most of the challenges in higher ed right now, is that there are a lot of puzzle pieces that fit together in a pretty broad win-win situation. This is not really the case with other things. So think about, cutting costs, curtailing, for example, library hours. You may drive down the cost of education, and there's certain wins associated with that, but there's also going to be certain costs and losses associated with that. But with OER, we see a constellation of different stakeholders getting different things out of the transition to open educational resources. So usually with administration, with boards of trustees, with legislators, we're talking about things like how the data suggests that you might increase your overall college enrollments by advertising low-cost learning materials and low-cost degree programs, particularly like sometimes we call them Z degrees that use all OER. We're also interested with those groups in persistence and retention, and the fact that students will reinvest that money in money saved from textbooks back into taking more credits, and taking more credits generally means that you're more likely to persist to graduation. So that pitch looks very different than the pitch that I make when I'm talking to a colleague or faculty member about why to switch to OER. So students are obviously really interested in saving money, and certainly parents are very interested, and some of the folks who might help with college costs are interested in saving money. Faculty can be persuaded that saving money is important for students, but of course as faculty, we want to make sure that pedagogically our course is as strong as it can be. So usually when I'm talking to faculty, I'm leading with the pedagogical benefits of moving to open educational resources. And that's what I actually want to spend a minute talking about in the next slide now, is the kind of thing that I will share with faculty colleagues. And usually I'll say, like, we start with cost when we're thinking about open educational resources because we're concerned with access, giving our students access to education, access to knowledge. But for the most part, we have the opportunity with OER to think not just about access to knowledge, which is kind of a consumer-based model, right? Like you want your students to have all the content so that they can learn it, absorb it, and potentially sort of, all I can think of is the phrase, spit that back to you on the assessment. So you can already see how I'm leading you here. Open pedagogy is a way of thinking about giving students not just access to knowledge that they can consume, but access to knowledge creation, the ability to be more participatory in their relationship to their learning. So there's a whole field that's grown up around using open educational resources and thinking about students less as consumers and more as producers. I'll give you an example from my own teaching. One of the things that first got me excited about open educational resources was that I was trying to save students money on an anthology of American literature that was made up primarily of public domain literature, right? Literature all pretty much before 1850 It was all in the public domain, but my students were still shelling out huge money for the Heath Anthology of American Literature. So we rebuilt the anthology actually as a class. My students and I, we foraged for public domain versions, which we replaced. Then we replaced the whole architecture of the book. Students wrote new introductions, they made maps, they made videos, and we built out this really amazing kind of draft textbook. That textbook has now been used by college students all over the country. It's been picked up by academics who are now creating a really sort of well-edited and comprehensive version of that early textbook. But what I figured out from doing that was that not only could we save the $90 that the textbook cost, but I could also start thinking about knowledge as something that was a little bit more alive. Our fields are alive. They're changing all the time. And remember, I taught early American literature, right? So that's literature before the Civil War. That field is still always dynamic, always in flux. So I really enjoyed the opportunity of bringing my students into the world of the field and getting them contributing to it, even though they were just beginners. To see great examples of open pedagogy projects and faculty who are thinking about how the open license empowers you to do things with learning materials, you can check out a site that we built for faculty contributions called openpedagogy.org, the Open Pedagogy Notebook. And there's lots of great examples there that you can check out. So that's the kind of thing I suggest you do if you're trying to reach faculty. Get some people who have worked in this before. Lead with all of this data that Lindsay talked about how important it is to student success and social justice to reduce the cost of your classes. But really spend some time looking at the potential for learning that can happen in classes that use open pedagogy. And finally, I just want to talk about thinking sort of from small faculty pods up to really large scale initiatives. So I teach at Plymouth State University, which is part of the University System of New Hampshire. We actually began working with OER just about 5 years ago with a very small 9-person pilot where we took 9 faculty members. We gave them small stipends. Usually stipends will range for OER for developing OER anywhere from $500 to about $2,000, and sometimes maybe even a little bit more. So with a very small amount of money, you can involve a small core of faculty, train them about the open licensing and searching for OER, help them replace content in their courses, reduce costs, and think about exciting new pedagogies. We ultimately scaled that small pilot up to the whole University System of New Hampshire, where instead of just 9 original faculty, we started seeding 10 faculty per year across the 4 institutions. We then brought in the community college system and we founded the New Hampshire Open Education Public Consortium. So that's the 7 community colleges and our 4 state 4-year colleges. And we all started getting on the same page about using open educational resources. We're just starting to, we've built a hub where we can share these resources, which really helps for things like community college conversion when students are coming from one curricular at the CCs into a curriculum in our 4-year institutions. We're working with NEBI on a regional partnership now, and we have a membership with Doers, which is driving OER sustainability for student success. That's a group of statewide initiatives who are all trying to affect change at a very big level across national public higher education. So my point here is that to do really big things, you can start pretty small. If you can identify in your institution about $5,000 and you can talk about the return on investment that your college is going to get back, both in cost savings for students and in things like better throughput rates and retention and that kind of stuff, you can build out to this. It only took us at USNH about 5 years to go from that tiny pilot. We've saved well over $1 million pretty quickly and are now working at these much broader levels. So start small, build your faculty champions. If you don't have them yet, don't try to do something across your entire institution. Start by helping people understand how exciting and gratifying the work is. Let your students be part of this work so that they can explain in their own voices why it matters to them. that we think about this kind of equity in our choices of learning materials, and just start small and have faith that you will build larger as you go. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Kurt, but we will also be here to answer questions at the end, and I'll also keep looking at the Q&A as well.
Thank you, Robin. I actually want to start off by way of transition before I get into some of the things that we've observed, we've learned about the role of OER in this time of disrupted education. Just a little bit of perspective. Some of the things Robin was talking about how to get started and how to build things to scale. My perspective on this, my comments today are really about from MIT OpenCourseWare as a provider of OER, less about, let's say, working with MIT faculty as users of OER. I'm going to be channeling kind of what we hear from our global, truly global learner and educator users, which are showing us again and again and again how important this openly licensed material is out there. About 70% of the traffic we get to our site comes from outside the United States. And we think about 50% of those users are actually enrolled students who are looking for supplemental material. Just a bit of quick background for you don't know. OCW launched almost 20 years ago in 2001 with a goal to share virtually all MIT courses online. We've got at this point over 2,500 courses, kind of diverse materials, syllabi, reading lists, lecture notes, problem sets and essay prompts, videos, and even some online textbooks. So that's kind of what's drawing the users there. And I've got to acknowledge that creating all of this content is not free, especially at scale. And so we received, to get us off the ground, some substantial philanthropy from Hewlett and Mellon foundations, other gifts, and backing from the university to get us there. At this point, about 60% of MIT faculty have voluntarily contributed their materials to OpenCourseWare, but we did get off the ground with some faculty stipends on the order of $1,000 to $3,000 to get them, to kind of support them for their getting started and working with the program. But it's really at this point kind of reached the culture shift that allows us to sustain. So returning, that's some background. Returning to the slides here, the lesson that we've learned, that we've taken away over the last few months is that, wow, open education resources are just so important for what we would think of as resilient education in any time of disruption. Happens to be the pandemic right now, but we don't expect this will be the last time we'll go through something like this. Kind of from the date that the emergency declarations came out in the United States and elsewhere, you can see in this graph on the left, traffic to OpenCourseWare compared to last year just went straight up, and through the month of April, about 75% higher than we were last year. It varied from country to country, I think, depending on the local situation, how much people were supported by their local networks versus needed to go outside to get more materials. Particular interest in not only like core STEM subjects, but also like some people very interested in finance and learning the program and things like that too. The disruption that we've seen over the last few months it's really a systemic, across the board sort of disruption, and we had heard from our users over the years how important OCW and OER could be for those disruptions. We can go to the next slide. We've heard, for instance, from people who are living in conflict-ridden areas. This student, Toba Siddiqui from Pakistan, literally couldn't get out of her house to go to school some days because it wasn't safe, and she was able to use materials that she found openly shared through OpenCourseWare to keep her course of study going, so that when she could return to the classroom, she not only had kept up, but in some cases been able to leap ahead. In addition to systemic disruptions, go to the next slide, sometimes those disruptions can be intensely personal. People have to stop out of their education program for a wide variety of reasons. Take the case of what Anita Moreno told us about the role of OpenCourseWare when she had to stop out for some medical issues. And the ability to access and retain and return to again and again these materials, which she could take with her, which she could access at any time completely on her own pace. So it allowed her to get through a pretty rough patch in her life for several years, and then kind of return back to regular study and back into the work life now. It's been a real success story. So it's not just for the students as well, that as educators around the world have scrambled to put their materials online, that have been able to access the materials that we've shared with them to allow them to just concentrate on how they're going to shift their pedagogy, knowing with some comfort that materials that have been shared openly, kind of vetted by leaders in the field, they can pull that into their own teaching, and it works really, really well for them. So if we go on to the final slide here, another, I think, key takeaway that we've had from these last couple of months is hearing how important it is that we not assume too much about the internet access and the device access that our learners have. And this is, not only the case in the United States, but around the world, that so many people don't have that reliable stuff. And so OpenCourseWare at MIT has always shared our materials on a kind of a baseline, low common denominator of making sure that our materials are easily downloaded and you can carry them with you, even if you don't have, fully connected access all the time. It's really important that it's independent of, say, a specific technology platform, and that it's there so people can continue to not only download and remix, but also just print the stuff out and carry it with them. It's the basics like that have proven to be really, really helpful in this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Robin. Sorry that my finger was a little trigger happy there.
I'm eager to get to the Q&A too.
We just wanted to quickly put out some tips on how to get started. And I am going to kind of breeze through these because we have some resources available on our website, which highlights these. But for you senior leaders out there who are thinking about, okay, how can we do this at my institution? You very likely already have individuals at your institution doing some kind of OER initiatives or work. So identify those existing efforts at your institutions, and then, connect with these individuals and work to align these OER efforts with your institutional strategic initiatives. Most institutions have initiatives that either directly or indirectly address equity, diversity, affordability, and sustainability. And OER actively play a role in addressing all of these and more. If you don't already have an OER policy, consider putting together an advisory committee to develop one with representation from departments like the library, faculty members, both full and part-times. We don't want to forget about our adjuncts here. Student governance, administrators from teaching and learning centers, instructional design, IT, diversity and inclusion offices. Those are just some examples. Encourage faculty OER adoption and be sure to offer incentives such as mini grants, right? Reviewing OER and learning about the opportunities that come with licensing permissions takes time and should be recognized and rewarded. Small monetary investments can amount to large student savings. Do not mandate participation. This can go really wrong. Instead, support faculty and student-led resolutions in their respective governance organizations. And this is really important. Support your practitioners, right? The people who are supporting faculty and doing this work. It often becomes just another added duty into someone's daily existence in the library. I can definitely attest to that myself for a few years. So consider joining an organization like the Open Education Network, which formerly the Open Textbook Network. This organization is particularly helpful in supporting practitioners on the ground, and it also boasts a 43% OER adoption rate among faculty who attend their workshops. Consider investing in OER efforts in the tenure and promotion process. You could do service for OER adoption, scholarship for creation, teaching for OER-enabled pedagogy. This student-centered work that this is student-centered work that the junior faculty often stray from because it's very rarely recognized in tenure and promotion. And again, don't conflate OER with inclusive access. So key takeaways, what OER is, consider the health and safety going into the fall semester, think about the flexibility of those licenses. Return on investment is significant with these efforts. So small investments can go a very long way. Practitioner support is vital. Please support your practitioners. Unpaid labor is very frustrating for these individuals. And mandates violate academic freedom, and they really turn faculty off from engaging in this work. So with that, I think we will open the Q&A. And I'm going to turn my video back on. Let's see. Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, so Sarah Hutton asks, hi Sarah, looking at widespread adoption of OEP at your institution, that is the hope, what is the architecture of support that you would recommend for supporting a shift in pedagogical development? Where would a collaborative group of librarians, instructional designers, faculty, these are a few of the groups I presume would be involved, best be situated? Reporting to the Office of the Provost, other. So I will touch on that quickly, and then I'm sure Kurt and Robin might want to chime in. So I am a librarian, so all of the OEP, the open educational practices or open pedagogy, OER-enabled pedagogy, there are different names for this. Support comes a lot from the library because me especially, I really like to support students with the information literacy side of those and scaffolding those skills that students need to participate in that kind of pedagogy. So learning about copyright and open licenses, learning about their agency and privacy and participating in projects like this. I would say working with, if you have some kind of center for teaching and learning, is certainly a good partner to have. Your accessibility office, also a good thing. We are funded through our provost office, so I think having some connection there is definitely important. But Robin, do you want to chat about that quickly?
Yeah, sure. So the center that I direct, it's called the Open CoLab, or the Open Learning and Teaching Collaborative at Plymouth State. You can find a variety of learning community syllabi there that we have used as we've run learning communities. And I think the learning community model is a really great model. So the question of who you report to, I think, is less important than the question of who is generating the momentum for the collaboration. So what we've decided at Plymouth is that it's been most helpful when the momentum from the collaboration is generated from within the faculty. So in order to get that to happen, we seeded these learning communities with a little bit of professional development money for participating. We built emergent curriculum that we tied to mission. So I think one thing you'll want to do is, instead of just being like, let's save money on textbooks, which is like not a super inspiring rallying cry for a lot of people, figure out like what the mission is of your institution, right? At MIT, they've got a real sense of knowledge sharing, right? Like public knowledge sharing, that the academy is built to make knowledge accessible. At Plymouth State, we are much more focused on like sort of pedagogy and teaching, right? So our mission is very much about how do you connect with students and get students working out in the world. Figure out how your mission aligns with OER and build a community around that mission and make OER a part of that. And at the Open CoLab site, you can find the cluster, we call it cluster pedagogy. It includes open and interdisciplinary modes. But you can find a sort of how we built that learning community and what that looks like. And At Keene State, they've had a version, that's our sister campus, a version really focused on open pedagogy. They called it the Open Pedagogy Learning Community. That was, I think, about 20 faculty volunteered to participate. They did readings, conversations. So I think anything that focuses on getting the conversations going and giving support to faculty to really emergently do the work, as opposed to saying, you're going to switch to OER, like, here's a librarian, we'll look for OER and off you go. You'll get more bang for your buck if you focus on what's really important to those faculty and to your institution.
Thanks, Robin. Kurt, do you want to chime in for 1 minute, and then we're running close to time here.
Sure, yeah. So the situation at MIT, it wouldn't surprise people. It might be a little different than you find it at some other institutions, but OpenCourseWare came up under the Office of the Provost, kind of that central function, and to operate at the scale that it does, kind of publishing hundreds of courses per year across the curriculum, we adopted a model that wasn't going to get in there and shift the instructional design of those courses at all. It was just whatever you used in the classroom, we're going to put out there for the world. It's got to stay, in general, a pretty light lift. There were a few people who volunteered to do way more than that, but that was very, very above and beyond, fairly far and few between. But I'd say since 2015 or so, and the emergence of MOOCs and other ways of sharing material, which are more sort of intensely based in online, we've created this role called Digital Learning Lab Fellows, and they're people who they have this sort of joint appointment where they've got one foot in the open education, the open learning organization that I'm part of, and one foot in the departments, and they're kind of content experts. They often are like postdocs or something like that. And so they're able to be this really amazing bridge between the kind of best practices in sharing the materials and using the tools, and how to really get in with the faculty and support them in like instructional design for their content. And that's proving to be a really powerful model that I think is only going to grow for us.
And maybe I'll just take this last question in the chat before I'm sure Lindsay is going to try to probably unsuccessfully corral us into stopping talking. This is from Sarah Hutton, and she's really asking about the role of students in advocacy for OER. And yeah, there's lots of great data that suggests that students have a lot of power to change institutional culture. So some ways of thinking about that are, number one, to get your student senates involved, helping them understand the issues of OER, helping them understand that faculty have this option, which a lot of times makes students sort of righteously indignant that faculty have this option and haven't been using it. So we see a lot of success with students who then sometimes pass resolutions from their student senates, which can be pretty powerful in persuading faculty. The other way students can be really helpful, though, is a lot of campuses, ours included, we're moving towards this. Our community colleges just did it. They'll use something when you register in your registrar's designations, so that the course, you can shop for courses by either no cost or low cost courses. So courses that use all OER would be a no cost, and usually low cost would be under $40 or so. What we do find for sure is that students will choose and enroll in the no and low cost courses or sections before the sections that use higher cost learning materials. And because of the effect on enrollments, faculty get persuaded quite quickly when they don't want to see their sections canceled and other people's sections enrolling, that they might want to look into OER. So using registrar's designations can be another great example. But if you are planning an OER initiative, put students on your planning board, not just, don't just cater to them, but include them in the planning. And I think you'll get great results.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Kurt. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our webinar. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for the great questions. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Kurt, so much for your participation. If you're interested in learning more, you can check out our website, nebi.org/openeducation. We have a few different sections on the page, and one of them is leadership resources. So there's a few things to get your institution started and specifically thinking about moving forward in the fall during COVID. And if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address and contact information is there. Slides will be available on our website and also a recording of this webinar. So thank you very much.